Sapere Aude. Have courage to use your own understanding. That is the motto of enlightenment, says Immanuel Kant in his essay An Answer to the Question, What is Enlightenment? Why Kant is the king of the Enlightenment, I shall explore here. But first, let me point out that the word enlightenment is quite different from the German word Aufklärung, which is, however, how we translate Aufklärung into English. Enlightenment, as you can hear, has connotations of spiritual awakening. For example, the enlightenment of Jesus Christ or the Buddha. Enlightenment has in English definite religious overtones, and it speaks to a new light, as it were, the light of reason that shines upon what had hitherto been shrouded in darkness. Now, the German word Aufklärung is similar, but a bit different. Aufklärung could be translated very literally as up-clearing, or clearing up, clearing open. A clearing that is opening up. And in fact, it is the clearing of the sky. There are here no overtones that are religious or spiritualistic or quasi-religious. Instead, Aufklärung implies that the light had already been there, but that clouds or cloud formations had obstructed or obscured the light. Not necessarily completely and absolutely, but to such an extent that the light was not perhaps capable of shining as it is supposed to shine. However, to stress it again, the light was there. So here is not implied a total age of darkness, nor is implied some sort of religious enlightenment or awakening. Instead, Aufklärung has moral and ethical overtones, and especially ethical ones, not so much moral ones. So we're not here so much concerned with questions of goodness and evil, but really with the question of ethical dwelling and living together. Sittliches Leben, as Hegel would put it, with ethical life. Hence, one should not wait for the light of reason to shine for one and to enlighten one, to take one out into, almost as if it were automatically, to the greener pastures of wonderful, enlightened, rational life. Instead, Aufklärung places a demand on you. It places the demand on you to have courage. There is a sense of interiority in Aufklärung, where in enlightenment it appears that the light, even if the light of reason, is coming from the outside. So let me read the first paragraph of Kant's essay on Aufklärung. Enlightenment is man's emergence from his self-imposed immaturity. Immaturity is the inability to use one's understanding without guidance from another. This immaturity is self-imposed when its cause lies not in lack of understanding, but in lack of resolve and courage to use it without guidance from another. Sapere Aude. Have courage to use your own understanding. That is the motto of enlightenment. Or shall we say, of Aufklärung, of clearing up, of letting the sky clear. By what? By one's use, by one's courageous use of one's own understanding. Because what Kant sees is that we live in an age of enlightenment, but not in an enlightened age. We live in an age of Aufklärung, but not in an age that is aufgeklärt. Hence, Kant very provocatively puts emphasis on autonomy, on the severe autonomy of being able to live up to the demands of an age that is truly an age of Aufklärung, where one frees oneself from self-imposed immaturity. And it is self-imposed as soon as one relies on some expert's opinion. Demands such as free speech or free thought, which is the demand, for example, by Mendelssohn, is not enough for Kant, precisely because such demands often bring about a mirage, the mere semblance of insight and understanding, and in fact a mirage of autonomy. Moses Mendelssohn was concerned with the vocation of man. He thought that man was called upon, and was called upon to perfect himself, but this in the context of society, so that there is a theoretical knowledge about practice, but that it is in a social context that these theories must be enacted. So enlightenment is socially acquired. Now, Kant does not deny that there is a social dimension to Aufklärung. So to think for oneself for Kant does not mean to make up one's own morality or simply to arrive at whatever one wants to believe in, or just whatever takes one fancy. It's quite the opposite. To have courage to think for oneself means to be autonomous in a genuine sense, means to accept and appreciate the universal moral law. However, the difference between Kant and Mendelssohn should be this one, where Mendelssohn places emphasis on social context and social practice. Kant places emphasis and takes seriously the demand of the self-proclaimed age of Aufklärung, of the Enlightenment. Kant places hence the main focus, or the sole focus, on the individual. And we can see how the Mendelssohnian claim to social context-grams, educational policies, the admittance of free speech, might produce, as mentioned before, the mirage of an enlightened society, but would not bring about genuine Aufklärung, which comes back down to autonomous courage to think for oneself, and in so doing, submitting oneself freely to the moral law and its demands. The Kantian demand is a much stronger one, a much profounder one, and one that is ultimately more serious and severe. In fact, on the Mendelssohnian picture, one could envision quite easily a society that deems itself to be enlightened, while never really placing the demand on the individual to think for oneself. Such a society might very easily lapse into scientism and the belief in the expert class. The Kantian picture, however, is a very different one. It takes seriously the demand of genuine Aufklärung, of genuine such ethical enlightenment, which demands of everyone at the time when they are adults to begin to think for themselves radically, and not to be cowards, not to look for guidance. Kant writes, laziness and cowardice are the reasons why so great a proportion of men, long after nature has released them from alien guidance, nonetheless gladly remain in lifelong immaturity, and why it is so easy for others to establish themselves as their guardians. It is so easy to be immature. If I have a book to serve as my understanding, a pastor to serve as my conscience, a physician to determine my diet for me, and so on, I need not exert myself at all. I need not think. If only I can pay, others will readily undertake the irksome work for me. The guardians who have so benevolently taken over the supervision of men have carefully seen to it that the far greatest part of them regard taking the step to maturity as very dangerous, not to mention difficult. Thus we see that with Kant, the society that would emerge would be quite a different one than the Mendelssohnian society, which arguably is the society that we have inherited. So Kant is the king of the Enlightenment because he takes seriously its demands, but also moves well beyond just an age that deems itself to be enlightened, and instead he shows the very limitations also of what Aufklärung would genuinely mean. It would be high time that we heed Kant's call To put it simply, the Kantian society, the realm of ends, is a lot less rigid one than a Mendelssohnian one, which places emphasis on social context and social reinforcement of theory into practice. Whereas in Kant, where practical reason takes primacy, but in such a way that every adult is under the demand to think courageously for himself, which is to say, to submit to the moral law, this could bring about rather a society that is genuinely less rigid and, in a genuine sense, open and radically grounded in itself.